Alrighty. So our What's New in iLearn, this is following our upgrade that we just tackled at the end of July. So we have a bunch of new features. Hopefully everyone has been in the system since and taken a look at a lot of the new features that we have going on. We have a few heavy hitters that we're going to talk about today, some drastic changes in some places and some very minor changes in others. So as you know, of course, getting to iLearn, we do recommend people can always bookmark the iLearn.marist.edu instead of going through myMarist or marist.edu every time. A lot of our upgrades have to deal with tool improvements. We do have a lot of new tool functions along the way. And of course, everything across the board is a benefit for our instructors and students. We also are now responsive design. What that means is that you can now access iLearn using a tablet or an iPhone or Android phone. And what iLearn is capable of doing is condensing the screen. What that is that allows you to be able to view everything and still check things out. Check things out as you move across the board. The great thing about that is, of course, if you need to quickly get in and check a student message or something like that, you can use your phone to do so. We always recommend to students that they do not use their tablets or iPhones for grade-dependent items. We wouldn't want a grade to suffer because of a poor display or something on an iPhone. Although it can display on an iPhone or Android phone or phones across the board, we don't want students to depend on that and experience technical difficulties. They shouldn't, but by all means, we do always suggest that students do any grade-dependent items from computers. All right, so one of our biggest changes moving forward is home and navigation. This is going to affect how you access your classes and things like that. Some of our other heavy hitters are going to be the lessons tool as well as Gradebook. Everything above and beyond that is pretty minor, but we're going to talk about everything in this presentation. So first and foremost, if you've been in the system, you've probably noticed that our banner across the top looks a little different. Let me get my fancy arrow. So as always, you do have your sites listed across the top. You can still customize this. It's a lot easier to do. So you do have the quick access sites across the top. You also have what's called the site drawer over at the top right next to your name. The great thing about the site drawer is it does list all of your sites in a much nicer way. And you'll also notice a little star icon to the left of every site. The advantage of the star icon is you can set your favorites, and setting your favorites allows you to customize what shows up at the top here. Anything that has a yellow star next to it will show up. Anything without is still accessible through the site drawer. However, it won't crowd that top banner for you. Another change is we used to have My Workspace. My Workspace still exists. It's the page that comes up when you first log into iLearn, but now it's been renamed to Home. You will notice some other that you can still access your profile and create sites as well. To create a new site, you can either click on your name or the site's drawer, and there's going to be a nice blue button across the top that says Create New Site. One of our other big changes is the navigation and tool display across sites. Our tools are no longer set up in subcategories. Previously, we had communication, tools, and I believe administrative management, site management. Now our tools are just listed across the left. The advantage to this is that you as the instructor can completely customize the display. As always, you can add and remove tools that you are or are not using. You can also shift how you want them to appear. Let's say you want the very first tool at the top to be syllabus. You can edit that to slide that tool all the way up top. If you don't use calendar, you can remove that as well. You were able to do that in the older system, but it's definitely a lot nicer to do that in the new. Also, as you navigate among sites, we have what's called the breadcrumb trail at the top. This is really great. It lets you hop around the course easily. It will always indicate your course and then the tool that you are in. And specific to the Lessons tool, it will show you what subpage you are in as well. To ever get back to the main page or the front of the tool, the very front page that it brings up, is you would go ahead and click this little blue icon here. So for example, if you're in Resources, it'll show the folder icon and the word Resources. And if you click the blue name of that tool, it'll bring you right back to that. That allows you to navigate within the tools themselves. Okay, so this is a little better display of our tools and items that you'll see across the board. As I mentioned, we do have it renamed to Home, which is your workspace. You still have resources that are specific to you. We have the list of sites at the top, the site drawer on the right, along with your profile and picture. And we do have the message of the day. The great thing about the message of the day is it'll indicate any upcoming upgrades or changes to the system. So right now we just have a Turnitin outage. Turnitin themselves are doing a upgrade on their end. So they've notified us of a potential outage coming up. Okay, so now into a few of our other changes. The one thing I want to touch on, although minor, is our rich text editor. Since our rich text editor shows up everywhere whenever you're creating forums, assignments, announcements, lessons, and everything across the board, we did want to highlight our rich text editor, also referred to as the CK editor. So you'll notice it looks a little different, but we do have a lot of the same functions as before. We have the paste from Word icon if you are pasting directly from something that you've composed in Word. You have your typical formatting options, as well as your styles, headers, formatting, fonts, and size. So you will notice it looks a little different, functions much of the same. There is a new function. You can add an audio recording embedded into the text. So that's just another neat feature that we have in there. All right. So one of our biggest changes, as I mentioned, was the gradebook. So our gradebook previously showed up as a management on the far left and the student display and grade entry on the right. Now, once your gradebook was set up, that gradebook management that showed up on the left was a little bit of a nuisance. So you'll be able to see in the new system, and I do have a screenshot coming up after this, is that our gradebook now focuses on that student display. It looks nearly identical to an Excel sheet. You have the students' names down the left and the grade items across the top to the right. You can also sort by category, so it does do a really great display indicated by color. So if you do have assignments, they'll all be highlighted in red. If you have quizzes, all the quizzes will be under the main category of quizzes in another color. It's really great. We do have an improved student summary page as well. My favorite thing about that is that if you are holding office hours and if a student is visiting you, you don't have to bring up the gradebook and hide it from them on your screen. You can actually click on their name, and this existed before, but it's a lot nicer now. You can click on their name and just show them their scores and where they stand with their grades. Here is our screenshot of Gradebook. So you'll see here we have a bunch of different items. Grade management is going to be under settings. Once it's done, you're done. We do have the student display down here on the left. We have the grade items across the top. You'll notice here we have a category for tests, and here we have a category for assignments. It also will show you the category total. So for example, we have assignment 1 here where we've entered grades, and then over here we have the category total for assignments and assignments alone. So the great thing about that is it does show your students incrementally where they stand within each category as well as your course total. Every time you enter a grade in the gradebook, it gives you a little green checkbox to indicate that it's been saved. We really like this feature. Previously, you actually had to click update for all the changes to be saved. If you didn't click update, sometimes you lost the input of that column of grades. Now it does save as you navigate between students. Another item you'll notice is this little lock icon. It's super faint, but you should be able to see it. This indicates that the item is pulling a grade from somewhere else. That's also indicated by the icon next to the name of the item. You'll notice assignment 1 and assignment 2 have just text, but that we have project 1 here and we have midterm exam here that do indicate that the grade is actually fed from something else. Those are linked items, so this midterm exam is pulling a grade from tests and quizzes. The reason there is a lock icon here is that you can't enter the grade here. If you did, you'd be stepping on your own toes. So this lock indicates that it is linking to another item elsewhere, and the grade must be entered elsewhere. Up top, it does allow you to control what items you're showing. You can control and show and hide specific items, and you can turn off the group by category as well. We do have some changes with tests and quizzes. They are very minor. You'll notice that the interface is a little more simplified. It actually, it's called an accordion display. So you have different headers, and when you click on the header, it expands. When you click on the header again, it minimizes. So it functions pretty well. We do have a new question type called hotspot. Not relevant for all courses and sites, but a good example of how to use image of a dissected frog, and then have the student for part A show where the liver is, for part B show where the lungs are, that kind of thing. And it allows the student to actually click and drop targets on the image. We do have improved student navigation, which I love. It allows our students they have a little tab on the right-hand side of their tests and quizzes. This allows them to see where they are in the quiz or test, how many they've answered, how many they have to go, as well as to mark questions for review. The questions will then display differently depending on what they're looking at, and they can always use that to see how much longer they have and questions that they need to go back and look at. We do have excellent improved reporting and statistics. The display that it shows your item analysis per question has been improved, so I think everyone will enjoy that as well. For our lessons tool, we did have a lot of people using lessons prior to our upgrade. It was available, but now it's even better. It almost lets you design some sort of web page. You can control columns, you can embed images, you can shift out sections and things like that to really customize how the lesson is displayed to your students. So the layout and customization possibilities are endless. The menu and interface is a lot simpler. It does rely heavily on icons, so this is where I suggest that people just go ahead and click, see how it expands, see how it changes, and you can always undo the changes that you've done. If you mouse over the icons, it does indicate what that icon does, so it's a nice little cheat sheet as you're navigating through lessons. Previously, for those who were using lessons already know it's capable of this, but it does allow you to directly link to other activities. The great thing about this is instead of telling your students to go to the assignment tool or go to the forums tool, you can actually hide those tools, although you do have to keep them in the site for management purposes. You can hide those tools altogether from student view and just keep your students in the lessons tool. What this allows you to do is really control their navigation through your course and the course content to access those activities. Okay, so now I'm going to do a screen share to show everybody the new system and highlight many of the things I've been talking about. Does anyone have any questions before I do so? If you'd like to chat, you might just have to unmute yourself, or you can always type in the chat as well. Okay. So it looks like we're good to move on. I haven't seen anybody type in the chat. All right, so bear with me. Let me turn off my annotation. And we'll go ahead and get started here. All right. Okay, so the first thing I have, let me just screen share again. My computer's not behaving. There we go. So the first thing I have is just a quick peek into what our old gradebook looked like. So this should look familiar to everybody. We had that site management down the left, the gradebook management down the left, as well as the student grades on the right. So this is just a comparison of the old, and we'll take a look at the new as well. Okay, so as we hop into a course, all right. So here we do have, this is our sample of our course. You just open up the chat and move it to the side, make sure nobody sends anything. So within the lessons tool, let me actually show you a sample of what it used to look like. Here we go. So this is a sample of a lessons tool. I'm touching on this guy first because it's one of our heaviest hitters. Within our lessons tool, we were able to add text and content below. These are a bunch of subpages that link students to other content. Now you'll notice that this is very linear, and depending on how much you added to this page, it kind of just became that long page scroll of content. Although you could organize into subpages, everything was very, very linear top to bottom. Now you'll see the same content, and I've just added a bunch of section breaks here, some columns. You'll see a nice little picture that I've embedded there, that's Emmett. And we have some columns and other blocks here. So you'll see that now the content has been chopped up. So I have my introduction at the top, some getting started content next to the embedded image, and some of the other content down below. You'll notice the excessive amount of icons on the right, but the great thing about all these icons is it allows you to control what you're doing and where. For example, let's say I need to add something before my header of Microsoft Office. I can do that right here. If I click the plus button, it allows me to add items and subpages to the very top of that. The great news of that is that previously, if you added something, it went right to the bottom of the page, and then you had to take several more steps to reorder items. Now you can just control where you're dropping items. So I can click the plus button here, and it gives me those choices to add items. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Lessons tool, the way that this is organized is our first 4 items are generally resource related. So for example, adding text, adding embedding content, which is for videos and images, adding content links, which is for either uploading files or using files you already have in your resources, and subpages, which allows you to do this exact same type of items, just on a different page. It allows you to chunk things out. Below that, we have display options. So we have the section break and the column break, which we can do here as well. Below that, we have links to actual items within your course. So for example, link to an assignment, test and quiz, or a forum. I'm going to add a section break here. You're going to see how it's going to customize my content and chunk up my items. So I am adding this before my Microsoft Office topic. So it's going to set up a section for my topics and assignment pages. So I clicked that, and you'll now see that it has split up that section here. If you don't like that, you just click this button to rejoin those 2 regions. So there we go. Easy to click around and change those items. Same thing up here. I can chunk out this content. I can add a section break or a column break. I do have 2 text items here. I'm going to go ahead and click my plus button, add a column break, and you'll see that that took my 2 text boxes and split them out into 2 separate columns. There's a lot you can do in here. You can set up how wide they are, up to 4 columns, entirely customizable, and things like that. Quite convenient to go ahead and set up your images and how things are showing up. So it is really great to be able to set up that content. One of the great things, of course, with all these icons is being able to view it as a student. That option is still available in this site. You'll notice it here all the way to the left above all of our tools. So I can click View Site as a student. And there's my lessons tool without all the fancy icons and everything. It looks a little messy with the icons because of how much you can do, but as you can see, once I view as a student, it's a nice, clean, crisp look from our students. You'll also notice that I did hide my resources and forums tool from here. Students are still able to get into those assignments when I've linked them to the page. It's a really great function as well. I'm going to exit my student view. Another thing I want to draw your attention to here on this site is our nice yellow banner for unpublished sites. Of course, when you first create your site, we want you to have the time to customize it and import your content. So if that yellow banner is at the top of your site, students cannot access it. So just keep that in mind as well. We put that publish button front and center for you, so you're able to click to publish your site. Also looking in my site, you'll see I do have my courses across the top. If we look at the far right, this is my site drawer. So if I click on that, it does bring up all the sites that I am in. And if I click and add any stars or remove stars, it allows me to customize that display. So if I click the X, it says reload to see your updated favorites. And it's now shifted my sites across the top. Even if a site is not listed here, you can still get to it by clicking your site drawer and clicking on the site to get there. And there we are. Let's take a look at a gradebook. So if I hop into one of our demo sites, I'm going to click on Gradebook from the left. The name is different. If you do see Gradebook 2, that indicates that that's the old gradebook. The other red flag would be if you don't see an icon above the name. So you won't be able to use Gradebook 2, but in some of your old sites, it is still there for viewing purposes. So if we click on Gradebook, you'll see here we have that sample and demo gradebook. I do want to draw your attention to one technical issue that we are working steadily to resolve. We believe that this will be fixed in the next week or two. When you come into Gradebook, before you add items, you have this lovely blue button at the very top. And unfortunately, nobody can see right now what it says, but you would use that button to add a Gradebook item. So just so you know, that's how you would add individual items. When you click on that button, this should look a little familiar. This is where you're able to add a title, a point value, a due date if you'd like, but it's not required. You can leave that blank, and select a category. You then have the same choices as before. You can release the item to students so that they can see them. You want to uncheck that if you don't want them to see it. And then yet another, just one other tiny button here that we're having an issue with. This button here is Create, and that'll create the item for you. Setting up categories, as I mentioned, we've removed that Gradebook Management item on the left. You can now do that under Settings. Typically, once that's done and set up, you're set and golden for the whole semester, which is why it is a separate option. So you'll see the tabs across the top. Click on Settings. You'll be able to click on Categories and Weighting and set up your gradebook here with your categories. Once your categories are set up, you can add those individual items to those categories. As I mentioned, we did have some changes with tests and quizzes. I'd like to highlight those as well. Here you can see it looks very similar, just a little cleaner look across the board. We still have your working copies and your published copies. And I'm going to give you a little preview of the exam so that you can see what it looks like from the student perspective. So I'm going to go ahead and click Begin Assessment, exactly what your students would do. And I want to draw your attention to this Question Progress tab on the right-hand side. This is what I was talking about for student navigation. This does give them a little peek ahead of the questions that are coming up. How many are open-ended? How many are multiple choice or true-false? And that's really helpful as they continue to do their questions. So they can always answer something, mark for review, and click next. And perhaps they're partway through the exam, although it does say question 2 of 20 here. They can still use that question progress to preview looking forward. I'm just going to exit the preview now. All right. One of the other things I did want to draw your attention to was the site CK editor for text. I'm going to show that using announcements. So I'm going to go ahead and click Add. And here you'll see that new CK editor has popped up. You will see the icons across the board. The new function I mentioned was the audio clip. That'll allow you to, it's right next to our embed image, that'll allow you to embed an audio clip. But you'll see it does look nearly identical, just a cleaner, crisper look across the board. That really sums us up for most of our new features here available in iLearn after our upgrade. I'm just going through a mental checklist in my head. We have the lessons, the gradebook, tests and quizzes, and our site navigation are those heavy hitters. Oh, the other thing I wanted to show you is the settings in tests and quizzes. So if I go into a test and quiz and I click on settings, this is what I meant before by that display change. So it is that accordion format now. If I click on About This Assessment, you'll see it has a nice little fancy transition to click among the few. So we have the About the Assessment. If I click on Availability, it slides up those options. So we're not looking at too many at a time. Grading and feedback, all of the same settings that you had before, just a little different display. You still have the Expand All option on the far right, which will expand all the settings if you want to navigate through all of them as well.